Welcome back to the Cobb County Republican Women's Club Candidates Forum. Our next candidates are for U.S. Representative for the 11th District, filling the seat of Congressman Phil Gingrey, who is running for U.S. Senate. We have an additional panelist joining us to ask questions. I would like to introduce Chip Lake. Chip is the founding partner in the political consulting firm Glendale Strategies Incorporated. In that capacity, Mr. Lake has consulted for 4 members of the Georgia Republican delegation and has spent 6 years in Washington as Chief of Staff to Congressman Lynn Westmoreland. Chip lives in Marietta with his wife, April, and sons Austin and Carson. Our format again will be each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. They will field questions and will be given 1 minute to respond. Each candidate will also be given 2 minutes for a closing statement. There are 2 timekeepers, one directly in front of you candidates and one to my left. You will be given a 30-second warning card and a bell will ring to end. Due to time constraints, please refrain from applause until the end of the segment of the forum. Our candidates for the U.S. Representatives for the 11th District are former Congressman Bob Barr, Alan Levine, Representative Ed Lindsey, former State Senator Barry Loudermilk, Colonel Larry Rosinski, and Tricia Pridemore. Congressman Bob Barr, we will begin with your 1 minute opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Bob Barr, and I'm a candidate to represent the 11th District of Georgia in the U.S. House of Representatives. During the time that I had the honor of representing Cobb County and the rest of the 7th District in the House of Representatives, we had to deal with a president named Bill Clinton. Yet through leadership and hard work, we brought Bill Clinton to his knees. We forced him to sign a balanced budget, we forced him to cut taxes, and we forced him to reform welfare, among other things. We now have in President Barack Obama a Bill Clinton on steroids. He is moving this country toward a fiscal abyss. He has completely obliterated the strength of our diplomatic, military, and national security effort overseas. We need somebody in the 11th District that knows how to get the job done, that has been there, that has a proven track record of moving our conservative agenda forward. I'm the only candidate in this race that can make that claim with a straight face and honestly, and that is what the 11th District needs. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Barry Loudermilk, and 33 years ago while attending church I met a beautiful young lady by the name of Desiree. And shortly after we were married I felt the call to serve our nation, and so I joined the United States Air Force, and after 8 years of military service we returned back to my home state of Georgia, where I started a small business which I've been running for the past 20 years. Today we have 3 grown children, and we're very excited that our oldest son and daughter-in-law are about to give us our first grandchild, which is due around the time of the election. However, that child, when she's born, is going to come into a nation that is facing significant challenges that are brought on by big government. An overwhelming debt that threatens our national security and continual threats on our rights and liberties that we knew growing up. But I know we can restore America because I believe in American exceptionalism. Why am I running for Congress? Well, that's pretty simple. Because my children and grandchildren deserve better.
Thank you. We will now begin the questioning. You will have 1 minute for your response. You will be notified of a 30-second time limit, and then the bell will ring. The first question is from J.D. Van Brink, President of the Georgia Tea Party.
If you could design the perfect national tax system, what would it look like?
Senator Loudermilk.
Well, that's an excellent question, especially if you ask if we could design the perfect tax system. First, it would be a system that does not give the federal government direct access to the American citizens. It also does not tax prosperity, and it gives the citizens full control of how much tax dollars that they spend. What we've defined there is basically a national consumption tax, to where the states actually collect the tax dollars based on the sales tax, and then they pass it on to the federal government. But any tax system that we move to, because the one we have now does not work, we have to get rid of the IRS, we need to repeal the 16th Amendment, and the tax system that has been designed to do that would be the simple tax, which actually moves us to a flat tax until we actually repeal the 16th Amendment and go to a national consumption tax. That would be my choice.
Congressman Bob Barr.
We made a very small but important start toward a fair tax system when we passed the Balanced Budget and Tax Reduction Act of 1997. Unfortunately, even though that brought us to a balanced budget for about 3 or 3.5 years, the cost of government and government spending shot through the roof again. The only way to ensure that we have a fair tax system, a better tax system, one that keeps government spending in check, is to do away with the 16th Amendment, do away with corporate taxes, and institute what has become known as a simple tax, which is a consumption tax at a much lower rate than the fair tax proposals, because it is much simpler, it separates out FICA, so you have a much more direct way through a consumption tax, and you have a timeline that moves us rationally in that direction.
And the second question will be from Roseanne Hall, past president of CCRWC.
What do you believe is the most important issue that affects the voters in District 11, and how do you propose to address it?
Senator Loudermilk.
The national debt is by far the most dangerous thing that this nation is facing nationwide. By the end of this fiscal year, it's going to be $18 trillion. To give you an idea of how big $18 trillion is, if you go back to the beginning of our current calendar, which would be the birth of Christ, and you put away $16,000 every 60 seconds, you still wouldn't have enough money to pay off the debt today. Just the interest payment that we made on the debt alone last year would have bought 2,700 F-35 fighter planes, which cost $151 million apiece. We have to reduce the debt. The only way to do that is to force Congress to do it. Congress is not going to balance a budget. They've proven over the years of all the constitutional amendments they've ever passed, all of them have restricted state powers, not their own. Congress must introduce a balanced budget amendment, which will be the first act that I work on to force Congress to live within its means.
Congressman Barr.
The most important issue as I travel across the 11th district is to reduce the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government. People in the 11th district want their lives, their businesses, their local government back in charge of their lives. They want to get the federal government out of their pocketbook. They want to get the federal government out of their businesses. They want to be able to build roads where the citizens of that district wish those roads to go. They want to be able to hire people that they need to run their businesses and not have the federal government tell them what to do. They want to be able to keep more of their money so they can spend it on their families and those things that are important to them. They want reduced taxes in all of its manifestations. What a U.S. Congressman from the 11th District needs to do today and every year until we get this monstrosity back under control is to reduce the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government.
And the third question is from Chip Lake.
Thank you. This race is a Republican primary in one of the most predominantly Republican performing districts in the country. There are very few differences between you all on major policy issues. All of you are pro-life, all of you oppose Obamacare, all of you advocate for tax reform and for smaller government. What single item in your background or in your resume do you think best separates you from the others on stage?
Barry Loudermilk.
What separates me from the other folks that are up here on stage, in fact, they're all very good people, and I've got relationships with all of them. Mr. Barr and I go back 10, 15 years. Representative Lindsay and I served together in the State House, and Ms. Pridemore, when I ran for the Senate, came up and went door to door for our campaign. So we all go back, and we share a lot of the same ideology. But consistency, I think, is what separates me from the rest of the crowd. And showing the courage to stand up for those basic principles which founded our nation, which are those of faith, family, and freedom. And because of that is why I've been endorsed by most every respected conservative organization in America, because of that consistency. The consistency of standing up for what is right, the vision of our founding fathers, and the courage to stand for what is right even when it's not easy to stand.
Bob Barr.
The enemy is not here this evening. The enemy is not here anytime. The enemy is in Washington. It's the Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Harry Reid, known as the Undertaker, the man who never smiles, and its faceless bureaucrats all across this country who wield the heavy hand of government power to stifle creativity and entrepreneurship and personal freedom. The key to winning this race is to send somebody to Washington who knows how to do battle with those forces of evil, who has done so, and who has beaten them. I alone have that experience in the arena in Washington to fight and beat the forces of liberalism in Washington, in the United States Congress. If elected to serve in the 11th District, I will go back up with 8 years of seniority on key committees, the Judiciary Committee and the Financial Services Committee. That is what we need in Washington, and that is what separates Bob Barr from the other candidates.
And the fourth question will be from J.D. Van Brink.
What changes do you think are necessary for Social Security and Medicare? And do you support transitioning to personal accounts for retirement and health care?
Bob Barr.
In large measure, the debates over the years, such as there have been with regard to Social Security, Medicare, and even Medicaid, are defined largely by the terminology that's used. People talk about these as entitlements. They are not entitlements. Nobody's entitled to somebody else's money to use for themselves or to flow through a bunch of bureaucrats to take from one and give to another. But there are several things that we can and should work toward to reform these programs. First of all, we need to provide more flexibility to the states in those rare instances in recent years in which states have been afforded the flexibility to tailor their Medicaid, Medicare programs to their constituents. It has worked dramatically to lower the cost and to even out those programs. The eventual goal needs to be to move those programs, Medicare and Social Security in particular, toward personal savings accounts, which empowers the people to have at least some degree of control over their money.
Barry Loudermilk.
I was speaking to a group of college students just a few weeks ago and asked everyone in the room, how many of you believe you'll achieve the American dream? Only about 2 of the students raised their hand. And then I asked them, how many of you actually think you'll ever see any of the dollars that you're putting into Social Security? And not a single one of them raised their hand. And the problem is because of a loss of a term that we used to have, which was called the full faith and credit of the United States of America. And we've lost faith in our government because the government has gotten too big. And of course, as we've seen the debt that we've incurred, we've lost the credit of this nation as well. We have to, it isn't whether we want to, we have to reform these programs. It's just like every other Depression-era program that was a temporary solution has become a permanent problem in this nation. We have to reform it. We have to cut costs. And yes, I support migrating these programs to private accounts. But there has to be a transition because the money that was put in by the previous generations belonged to them as well.
The fifth question is from Roseanne Hall.
Considering the problems that Americans are experiencing with the Affordable Health Care Act, what efforts would you engage to either improve or remove it?
Bob Barr.
The Obamacare legislation, when it passed the House, was well over 2,000 pages in length. It was one of those rare pieces of legislation, lengthy legislation, in which there is not one good piece of anything, not one good crossed T or dotted I. Eventually, what we have to do is we have to kill it. We have to drive a stake through its heart, shoot it, burn it, cut it up, and scatter its spore ashes to the world. In the meantime, what Congress has to do, and this is an important power that the House of Representatives has that is not used often enough or consistently enough. We need to use the power of the purse to begin doing in a constitutional way what Obama is doing unconstitutionally. We need to defund specific provisions in the Affordable Care Obamacare Act and attach those to pieces, to appropriations bills that the president must have in order to run the programs that he favors. That will do one of two things. He will either be forced to sign it with those limitations in it, or bring him to the negotiating table where we can start to affect those changes.
Mr. Loudermilk.
The Affordable Care Act is neither affordable or does it promote health care. It's a government takeover of the insurance industry. There needed to be reforms, but this was not the answer and it needs to go away. But the reality is, even if the Republicans take the Senate and we pass a complete repeal, which I will vote for, I'll put my name on it, and I'll fight for it. The likelihood is the current resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, he has a phone and a pen, as he said, and he will veto it. So what we have to do is take advantage of the situation that is at hand and institute free market principles. Section 10,104 of Obamacare exempts direct primary care from Obamacare. Direct primary care is simple. It's just like when you take your car to the auto shop to be repaired, you pay cash for it. We need to implement those types of policies and procedures, remove the caps on health savings accounts, allow employers to put more into health savings accounts, and allow that to pay directly cash for direct primary care. That can truly revolutionize the healthcare industry in America by true free market reforms.
The sixth question is from Chip Lake.
Thank you. The issues facing our nation are complex, and the solutions are also complex. Recently, a candidate for U.S. Senate here in Georgia made comments critical of one of his opponents for not having a college degree. As a result of those comments, a debate has begun over what qualities are most important for an elected official to possess in order to be in a position to solve these complex problems. Without asking you to wade into the U.S. Senate primary, what qualities do you believe are most important for a member of Congress to possess in order to be in a position to positively influence change in Washington?
Bob Barr.
Not only a candidate, but the member of Congress that represents, beginning in January of 2015, the 11th District of Georgia, must have the qualities of being someone with his heart and soul, not only in the district from which he or she represents, but also somebody who understands our form of government, who has taken an oath of office to that government and to that Constitution, who understands how to get things done, not only what needs to be done in Washington, but how to get things done. It's very easy in Washington, or as in the state capitol, to introduce legislation. You just draft it up, you give it to the clerk, and they file it. And you can go home and you can say, I've introduced a piece of legislation. It's very easy to give a good stump speech. Everybody in the House of Representatives can get a 1-minute speech every single day. What's more difficult is to actually move that conservative agenda forward. That is the ability that we need, given the challenges ahead, whether it is the BRAC, Base Realignment and Closure Commission, whether it's reducing government spending. That's what we need, the ability to get things done.
Barry Loudermilk.
That is a very excellent question. And the very first thing our founding fathers said was the character of the individual. They have to have a selfless nature because they put serving others before themselves. But we also have to have a vision, the vision of our founding fathers, not just the words that we see on the Constitution, as Thomas Jefferson said, that the politicians and the judges will be able to squeeze any meaning out of those words, but the true spirit of the Constitution. The vision our founding fathers had of this nation was a government, a federal government that was so small and insignificant that you tended to forget that it even existed. We also need to experience. As a small business owner, I live day to day what big government and overregulation is doing. As a former legislator in the State House and the State Senate, I know what it takes to negotiate and reach across to others with different ideas. And as I say, I will negotiate my preferences, but I'll never compromise my principles. And it's to be well-founded, to understand the rules, the ideas, and the principles that our founding fathers held for this nation.
And the seventh question is from J.D. Van Brink.
Regarding national security, do you think that the spending level and/or priorities are adequate, and what would you change?
Barry Loudermilk.
As I stated earlier, I'm a veteran. I come from a long line of veterans. My dad served as a medic in World War II. My brother served in Vietnam. I served in the Air Force, and my youngest son is currently airborne Pathfinder. The problem we have is when you look at the structure of our budget, there's two budgets, a mandatory budget and a discretionary budget. National defense is in the discretionary budget. There is a lot that needs to change. We need to reform the procurement system. It's ridiculous when it takes 15 years from the approval of a new fighter jet for it to actually to come off the assembly line. We also need to stop social engineering in our military. One of our advisors on our military committee showed me a memo from a division the other day where they ordered soldiers out of the field training to come in and give them sensitivity training. We must stop using the military as a social engineering lab and put them back on the line defending our freedom.
Bob Barr.
Many of us in this room and many of the listening audience lived through the debacle of the Carter drawdown, which created a hollow military a generation ago. And we are indeed still paying the price today in many respects for what Carter visited on this country and on the world. We see it with the continued strength and rise of Iran, and we see it again on steroids with this president, President Obama. Even though we do not have the leadership that we need at the commander-in-chief position, and we will not, at least until January of 2017 with a new president. In the meantime, we must ensure and do everything that we can to ensure that our military has the proper logistics, the proper equipment, the proper personnel. And you cannot do that, Chip, with the current spending levels and those that are projected. We need to beef those up, and we need, particularly here in this district, to be on guard against another BRAC cut, because it's coming.
And our 8th question will be from Roseanne Hall.
When you determined that you wanted to run for Congressional District 11, what are the number 1, 2, and 3 reasons why you chose to run?
Barry Loudermilk.
It's interesting that one question is asked more than any other question. Why? Why are you running for office? Most candidates, they won't tell you why. They'll tell you what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. But I told you in the beginning, why? Because our children and grandchildren deserve better than what we're passing on to them. We have a very short time to turn this nation around. The second reason is when we looked at this district, it's one of the most conservative districts in the entire nation. We wanted to make sure that someone who represented those ideas and principles were in Washington, somebody who had the courage to stand up and fight, who had had the experience and had the reputation of standing up against big government. The third is what I said earlier, that we don't have a whole lot of time. This is the most critical election in the history of our nation. My children tell me often, Dad, we just want the America that you had growing up. We want to experience the freedom and the liberty that you had, not being constrained by big government. We can turn this nation around, but it's going to take a short amount of time, and it's going to take courageous leadership.
Bob Barr.
I've decided to run to return to the Congress of the United States because I love this country too much not to do so. I also am seeking the office of the representative from the 11th District because I know that you can't win if you don't fight, and you can't fight if you're not in the arena. That is the only place to be if you care for this country and believe that you can do something about it. Third reason is that I do know to an absolute certainty that we can do better. I've been there as a part of the team that did, in fact, defeat the programs of a liberal president. We balanced the budget, we reduced taxes, we reformed welfare, even though there was a sitting Democrat, a liberal, in the White House. And lastly, I run because I hear what Ronald Reagan heard when he talked about the American sound. That American sound, which is big-hearted, compassionate, and strong, still echoes out across this country, across this district. I hear it and I heed it.
And the 9th question is from Chip Lake.
Congress's approval ratings are at an all-time low, and most people agree that Washington, D.C. is broken. Many would agree that many of the problems in Congress lie within the structural framework of which Congress operates. Other than voting conservative, which is very important for this congressional district, is there anything else that a member of Congress can do to fix what's broken in Washington, D.C.?
Barry Loudermilk.
Any public service isn't just about ideals and ideology, but it's about relationships. It's the ability to build relationships with others and focus on those things of which you agree. Most everyone that, especially from this area and the other members of Congress from Georgia that I've met with, I've actually traveled with several others that are considered constitutional conservatives. And they begin to organize themselves into a caucus to focus on those things that are the most important, like balancing the budget and limiting government, and building a caucus together that works together for solutions. That's one of the first things that we can do. But we also have to reach out and do some other things, some dynamic things, such as changing some of the rules under which Congress operates, like putting a single subject rule in, like we have in the state of Georgia, where you can only have one subject matter in a piece of legislation to stop Congress from inserting spending bills into defense bills. And so there's a lot of structure that needs to change, which will have to happen over time, but relationships have to be in place.
Bob Barr.
When we balanced the federal budget back in 1997, it didn't happen by chance. When we impeached a crooked president in 1998, in December of that year, it didn't happen by chance. It happened because a group of men and women who believe in principles, who understood the Constitution, who had the integrity to stand relentlessly to do what was right, worked toward that end and accomplished those and many other accomplishments during those years when I had the honor of serving in the Congress. There are many things that can be done. Yes, it is broken, but it is not irreparable. We have the Constitution to guide us. That gives us a proper framework. It gives us the owner's manual, so to speak, within which to do it. It takes perseverance, which I have and have used before. It takes prioritization, and it takes realizing that you're not in Congress simply to grab a headline. You're there to relentlessly fight on behalf of the American people and your district to shrink the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government. I've been there, I've done it. I ask for your votes to do it again.
Mr. Van Brink has another question for everyone. We will start with Bob Barr.
Thank you. Article 5 of the United States Constitution provides that 2/3 of the states to apply to Congress to call a convention for the purpose of proposing constitutional amendments. A growing number of people believe that this method is our best chance to initiate term limit, balanced budget, and tax reform amendments. Do you support this effort?
You referred to the Constitution of the United States of America. The Constitution of the United States of America, I believe, is the greatest document written by the hand of man. You could amend it 50 ways to Sunday, and it still is not going to bring us back to the government that was envisioned by this document and by our founders. The point is, it is not the number of amendments to the Constitution, it is the will, the knowledge, and the perseverance of the American people to get back to what this document provides for us, and that is a government of limited enumerated powers. We have tried, and I voted for a balanced budget amendment. We didn't get it through. I voted for a term limits amendment. We were not able to get it through. You have to keep pressing these issues, but until we have a judiciary that understands what the Constitution is, until we have a president that understands he is not an imperial president, and until we have a Congress that is peopled by men and women who understand the role of the Congress to provide effective oversight and spending limits, we will continue to have those problems.
Barry Loudermilk.
The original Constitutional Convention in 1787, the founders gathered together and they realized they needed to provide a way to amend the Constitution. And as they were discussing how they were going to do that, they realized that Congress would be unlikely and probably would never pass any amendment that restricted their own power or their ability to spend money. History has proven that to be true of every amendment that's ever been passed in the Constitution. All the amendments restricted the power of the states. They never restrict the power of the government itself. The founders put in Article 5 the ability for the people to amend the Constitution by calling for a convention of the states to propose an amendment to the Constitution which it will follow the same process. I have co-sponsored legislation in the Georgia Senate that passed the House this year that would call for a convention of the states for a balanced budget amendment. This is the time that the founding fathers saw that we would need this, because I believe that if the Convention of the States gets close enough, as history has proven, it will force Congress to act and pass a balanced budget amendment.
And now our candidates will have their 2 minutes for a closing statement. Someone drew your name out of a hat, so this is the order. Barry Loudermilk.
You know, growing up here in Georgia, my parents instilled in me a certain set of values that we passed on to our children. Those values are put God first in everything you do, serve others before you serve yourself, and that standing up for what is right is not always easy, but it is always right. My dad, World War II veteran, served as a medic in D-Day in the Battle of the Bulge, and although he saw the worst of humanity, he never lost sight of the cause for which he was fighting, because he had his eyes upon his cause, not his circumstance. He believed in America. And he also passed along to me some advice. He said, son, never complain. Complaining never accomplishes anything. If there's something you don't like, you can do something to change your situation or just accept it as inevitable and go on with life. In 2004, I took my father's advice, and I used my experience as a husband and a father, as a veteran, as an employee and an employer, and I took that experience to the State House, where I served in both the House and the Senate. During that time, I became known as one of the foremost conservative leaders in Georgia because of my continual stance on those basic principles that founded this nation of faith, family, and freedom. Today, I'm running for Congress, and because of my consistency and my commitment to the Constitution, I have been endorsed by most every major conservative organization in this nation. Concerned Women of America, Family Research Council, Restore Our Republic, Madison Project have all endorsed our campaign. As a veteran, knowing the need for a strong national defense, I've been endorsed by the National Defense PAC. Freedom Works named me one of the top 5 candidates in the nation, and most recently, Senate Conservatives Fund named me the #2 conservative candidate running for the House of Representatives in the entire nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we can take this nation back. We can restore America, but it's going to take us working together. We must give it back to give our children a future that is free, safe, and full of opportunity. But I can't do it alone. It's going to take us working together. Go to our website, standwithbarry.com, and I would love to have your vote on May the 20th.
I'd like to thank the Cobb County Republican Women's Club for providing this forum, hosting it this evening. I want to thank Cobb County for making this facility available. Thank the audience for being here. Thank the viewing audience for watching, and thank the moderator and also those asking very insightful questions. My name is Bob Barr, and I was asked by President Ronald Reagan to serve as his and your United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. When Reagan nominated me as the U.S. Attorney, he didn't set me down and say, Bob, I want you to be a mamby-pamby U.S. Attorney. Just go down there, mark time, spend a few years down there, and then leave. No, he said, I want you to go down there and I want you to represent the people of the district, the Northern District of Georgia, to put the money launderers away, the drug traffickers away, the child pornographers away, the con artists away, and the corrupt politicians especially away, and that's what I did. When I was elected to serve as your representative from the 7th District, I did not hear from a single person that they wanted a member of Congress representing the 7th District who simply talked the talk, told us how conservative he was as many times as he could, and voted the right way, and then just came back home occasionally to let us know that he was still around. No, the people of the 7th District sent me to Washington 4 times to fight for them, to shrink the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government, and I was honored to help accomplish those tasks. I ask now for the people of the 11th District to send me to the Congress to finish the job that I started on your behalf back when I served in the 7th District. To know how to prioritize the issues, to know where to go to fight for these issues, not to simply talk the talk, not to simply vote the vote, but to actually get things done to move our shared conservative agenda forward. That's what we need. We need that now more than ever. And I, Bob Barr, ask for your votes on May 20th, 2014 to do just that. Thank you.